The next talk is going to be by Andrew Hunter with Guidon Exploration. He's a drilling engineering manager. Andrew holds a degree in petroleum engineering from LSU and has combined 13-year experience between U.S. horizontal drilling and deepwater Gulf of Mexico. His talk is on the San Andres problem. Shallow disposal has become the biggest drilling hazard in the Midland Basin. And I can attest to that. At Reliance, we drilled $1 million disposal well because of water flow in the San Andres that we had to convert a producer into an injector because we couldn't get through it. Andrew?
Thank you, sir. Well, since this is my first time at an AAPG gathering, I just wanted to say on behalf of all drilling engineers around the world, thank you guys for all you do. Truly. Believe it or not, a group of geologists actually changed my life and got me going on my career. When I graduated from high school, didn't know what I was going to do, and I was offered a scholarship to go study geology in Colorado at the field camp. And spent 6 weeks learning about minerals and structure and historical geology and just really fell in love with it. And at that point, I knew I wanted to be a petroleum engineer. So I went back 18 years later, last year, to look at the campus. I was just in Denver for some business, and I wanted to go see if I could find it. It had been a long time. And on my way there, let's see here. Yeah, so this is the picture of where I was staying, the caboose. And I forget what I want to say is that when I got back from geology camp as an 18-year-old, I was talking to my grandfather, and I found out that he actually attended the same camp and stayed in the same cabin, the caboose. So fast forward, 18 years later, I'm in the area. I want to go see if I can find it. And on my way to Colorado Springs from Denver, I get a call that tragically my grandfather had passed away. And so as I'm hiking around, reliving my time there, he was on my mind. It was just a beautiful coincidence of life. And so I was able to find a spot where he took his picture on the campus and took a shot there. So again, thank you to all the geology camp folks out there. So we're here to talk about the Permian Basin. And without a doubt, there's no better place to be a driller or a geologist. If you look at the Permian Basin compared to all the countries in the world, it would rank number 8 in the world in production. About 3.75 million barrels a day, just behind Iraq with 37 million people. And I'm estimating there's about 1 million people that support the Permian Basin. It's a big difference there. There's no doubt that makes the Permian Basin the world leader in barrels of oil per day per person. 3.75 barrels produced every day for every man, woman, and child in the Permian Basin. Second place is 5 times more than second place. It's not even close. By far the most active basin in the world. 437 horizontal rigs last time I checked. If you're drilling a well every 25 days, that's about 15 wells a year, $8 million a well, $52 billion a year in drilling and completion capital. It's astounding. We're looking at $1 billion right there. That's 10 pallets of cash. That's $52 billion a year. It's a lot of money. A wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So that's kind of a theme of my talk today, and you'll see why. So this is hot off the press. First time we've published our highlights. We've got about 32,000 net acres, 46,000 gross, 94% held by production, which is kind of rare right now in the basin. 1,200 drill-ready locations. Our average lateral length is 9,600 feet for all future locations, currently making about 14,000 barrels a day. Drilled 48 horizontal wells to date. Actually, the first 3 wells we drilled were all pilot holes, cut like 4,500 feet of core. We just looked at the Schlumberger price book and just said, yeah, we want one of all those. And so, great place to work if you're a geoscientist. Do not come to our office with any core logging tools. We're good there. We don't need any more of that, if any of you guys sell that. Probably one of the most commonly asked questions is, what is a guidon? Very commonly mispronounced. Any of those who didn't serve in the military, every group has a flag bearer, and that's called the guidon. Also, the lead ship in formation is a guidon. So great metaphor for a company. Just We get a lot of Guido energy, a lot of Guidon energy. So I want to take it back 260 million years ago, Permian time. You got ancestral North America colliding with ancestral Africa. And you can see there where modern-day Texas would be, where the Permian Basin is. And you got a giant inland sea there, lots of deposition going on. And really, when I look at that, there's really one thing that comes to mind, being from South Louisiana, is how was the fishing? I'm here to tell you guys, the fishing was outstanding in Permian time. This is a Permian age shark. Actually had like a buzzsaw for a jaw. It's pretty crazy. You wouldn't believe me, but in one of those cores I was telling you about, we actually, at 9300, we cut a core of a fossil from that shark. It was nuts. Helicoprion. You wouldn't believe it. But look at it. You can see the circular jaw there. Unreal. That's what it looks like when you break it apart. It's actually on display in our office if you ever come by. So back to our Permian age. This is a zoom in showing the structure of the basin. You got the Delaware on the west side, the Central Basin platform in the middle, Midland Basin on the east, modern day Texas. Here's what it's looking like. My talk today is focused on the Midland Basin, which is on the east side of the basin, and that's where our operations are focused. This all started back in 1923, the Santa Rita #1 discovery well. It was a gusher. And from that point forward, tremendous amount of wells have been drilled. This is a pretty cool graphic showing all the vertical wells by decade. Look at that. Holy smokes, that's a lot of holes. Is there anything that hasn't been drilled? I mean, there's just hardly a blank spot on the map, guys. With all those wells and all that oil production, there's also a lot of water, and that water had to be put somewhere. And historically, it's been disposed of shallow in the San Andreas Formation. And so that's the focus of my talk today. I wanted to take a little deeper dive into this problem we've been having. And if you look at the 6 core counties in the Midland Basin, we've got 2,000 plus shallow SWD wells. Okay, and if you when I'm trying to do some estimates of it, these are rough estimates. I'm just a drilling engineer. Keep that in mind, using drilling info. But if we've got 1.7 million barrels of oil production a day, your water cut is 2 to 1. So you're producing 2 barrels of water for every 2 barrels of oil. And you've got 2,280 total SWD wells, 89% of them are shallow. Your average rate per shallow well is about 1,250 barrels per day. You got 1 shallow SWD well every 2 square miles. If any of you have ever driven around there, it makes sense. There's a injection well on every corner just about. And so that means that there would be 2.7 million barrels of water per day being disposed of right now, shallow. That's 7 times the amount that we were disposing in 2010 before the horizontal revolution. It's huge. And if you look out into the future, what we're expecting to do in this basin, 2025, 3.6 million barrels of oil is the projection for 2025. That would equate to 5.4 million barrels of water that we're going to have to dispose of, which is 15 times the amount in 2010. Folks, it's just not sustainable. Trust me. So, taking a deeper dive in it, of those wells, about 40% of those disposal wells are commercial wells. And what's interesting about this is they have different incentives than the wells that are operated by oil and gas companies. They actually want more water. So even if you're a responsible operator, you decide, hey, I don't want to dispose of shallow anymore, you're still going to get hammered by your third-party commercial well around the corner because you don't have any control over them. They have different incentives. So really, the only way to solve this is to work together across operators in the same neighborhood. I looked at commercial disposal data online. The Railroad Commission actually publishes this, and it supports my broad findings just looking at using oil-water ratio and total oil production. 563% increase in commercial disposal in those 6 counties since 2010. So pretty much in line with that 700% increase. We're currently disposing 740,000 barrels a day in commercial wells. Pretty astounding. So what does this mean? Since 2010, we have injected 5 billion barrels of water shallow. 5 billion. Anybody remember your high school physics? What happens when you add volume to a closed system? The pressure is going to go up. P1 V1 equals P2 V2. So when we started drilling horizontal wells in the Midland Basin, we weren't seeing very much overpressure. You go back and read reports from 2010, when everything started, they were able to drill these wells with 3-string casing designs. In a lot of the areas, in fact, most of the areas we operate, we're up to a 10-pound per gallon kill mud weight environment in the San Andreas. The most I've actually seen firsthand, and it was in Reagan County, it was a 12-pound kill mud weight. So there's small pockets that are even more overpressured. And so, again, this is very concerning to me because at the bottom of the San Andreas, you've got a shale with a fracture gradient in the 10.6 pound per gallon range. And when you start to break that down, it adds a whole nother level of problems on the drilling side. It can compromise your casing point. So I'm not really real happy about where this is headed, and that's why I'm kind of giving this talk. And I found this online. I think it sums it up nicely. Disposing in the San Andreas is like raking up all the leaves in your backyard. Instead of putting them on the street, you just put a big pile right in front of your front door. Because every well we drill in the future is going to have to deal with this issue. It just doesn't make any sense. So I want to walk you through why it's such a drilling hazard. I'm going to show you our well construction. We set about 1,800 feet of surface casing to cover up the red beds, cover up the fresh water. We drill out 12.25-inch hole. We get down to the San Andreas, boom, it's overpressured. We got H2S, poison gas at the surface. We shut the well in, we kill it, and we're able to move forward. The only problem is right below the San Andreas, you've got the Clear Fork and the Upper Sprayberry, and they have a fracture gradient, especially the Upper Sprayberry has a fracture gradient of 8.7. So you cannot drill into an 8.7 fracture gradient rock with a 10-pound mud weight. It's just, you're going to have complete losses. You're going to lose your column of fluid. You're going to lose well control. You can't drill ahead if you can't remove the cuttings. It's very difficult. And sometimes that rock becomes unstable. It'll actually cave in on you. I've seen that happen a couple times. Just a real challenge. So what we've done is we've modified our casing design. We drill through the San Andreas with that kill mud weight, but we shallow set our intermediate casing above those loss zones in the Clear Fork lime. So we go about 200 feet into that lime right at the top of the Clear Fork. We isolate that overpressure, and then we're able to drill about 50% of our Sprayberry targets, 50% of our wells, all of our Sprayberry targets, we can drill with this design because the Sprayberry zones, your Middle Sprayberry, Joe Mill, Lower Sprayberry, they only require, an 8 pound to 8.5 mud weight to keep those wellbores open. So as long as you keep your mud weight below the fracture gradient of the Upper Sprayberry, you're able to drill these wells with a 3-string design. If you exceed that fracture gradient in the Sprayberry, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Many people have tried it, and you end up with a wellbore collapse. The Wolfcamp wells especially are challenging because they require typically between a 9-pound to 11-pound mud weight to keep those wells from collapsing. So for the Wolfcamp targets, this solution is not going to work. We're doing the 4-string design for Wolfcamps. Same 9 5/8 intermediate casing point, 200 feet into the Clear Fork lime. And then we drill our underbalance zones with a freshwater mud, set a 7 5/8 flush joint liner across it, isolate those underbalance zones. We're able to get a good shoe integrity, typically in the 11 to 12 pound range. And then we're able to drill our Wolfcamp laterals with as much mud weight as we need to keep those open. This is very reliable. We've done it on all of our Wolfcamp wells to date, with the exception of 2 wells at the very north of our position that have not become overpressured. And it's very reliable. We're 100% successful with this design. However, it costs $600,000 per well. It's a lot of money. In fact, if you look at a 2-section development, so a 10,000-foot lateral unit, you're looking at $13.8 million for all those drilling liners. And if you multiply that across those 6 counties, 4,200 square miles, $29 billion. So this is going to be a very expensive problem for us moving forward for the Wolfcamp targets, unless we're able to do something about it. I don't know, if anybody, if it were me, I might invest in drilling liners. That might be a good investment. So another thing that's concerning is all the non-productive time associated with the San Andreas. The chart, see on your left here, are the non-productive days for all the wells I've drilled in the basin since 2014, and as you can see, it's getting worse with time. The San Andreas pressure compounds every other drilling hazard we have. The slope is almost identical with the increase in disposal. In fact, I think 4 or 5 times out of the last 10 wells we've drilled in an area, we've become differentially stuck, and that's a real challenge, getting stuck. I will throw a nugget out for you guys. We've been successful freeing that using 2,000 gallons of HCl. That's been a real nice lesson learned for us. We've been 100% successful with that. It's something you can pass along to your drilling engineer when you go back to your office. So path forward, where do we go from here? We could continue business as usual, like most people are doing, spend the 600 grand on the liner, but that's not really changing the root cause of this issue. It's getting worse with time. Are we going to eventually have a Macondo type event that causes the regulators to take action? It's inconsistent with maintaining a commitment to having a safe operation. I've actually worked 2 years as a drilling supervisor in the basin. I've been masked up for H2S, the poison gas that's associated with these flows. It's really kind of scary. You start to wonder, man, what am I doing? You think about your family. So I'm very passionate about this issue, keeping people safe out there. You could also just let the well flow while you're drilling. Some folks do that. Again, not consistent with maintaining a safe working environment. Some folks have tried to weight up their system and dry drill through those underpressured zones. The problem with that is that the failure rate is about 20%. Talking to a big operator in the basin, they tried that dry drilling, and about 2 out of 10 wells, they would just have a huge wreck. So we really can't afford to have that kind of failure rate. The next 2 bullets, you could start transitioning your injection into deep disposal. That's something we're very interested in, and we're investigating, and we're investing in, actually. And then lastly, our biggest focus is reusing all our produced water. At Guidon, we've been successful in recycling 100% of our horizontal produced water, and we think that's clearly the path forward, and that's another reason why I'm giving this talk. I'm going to talk about our strategy for recycling water in my next few slides. I won't get into the weeds, but this will be published. I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. So again, we see the future as a combination of recycle as much water as you can and then go to deep disposal for any excess water that you have. Lastly, some folks that are smarter than me need to study this reservoir. All right, I just did this with Drilling Info in my spare time. I'd love to see reservoir team, a geoscience team, really study this reservoir and understand what are we dealing with, what do the projections look like, can we deplete it somehow? So I'm not going to talk through all this. I just wanted to have it in my presentation so people can reference it. But the pillars to our water reuse strategy are oxidization, settling, and then aeration. So you use oxidization and settling to treat the water, and then you have to aerate it to keep bacteria from growing in it as you store it. But again, this will be available to you. I'm not going to talk through it. It's not my expertise, but we have a guy named Chuck Pounds, who's our water superintendent. Outstanding guy, really one of our unsung heroes. It's very important to model your water inventory, and as you bring wells on. This is just an example of what we're doing here. As you can see, at this point, we realize we're going to need to go from a 3 million barrel capacity up to a 4 million barrel capacity. Something that every company in the Permian Basin should be doing is modeling their water inventory versus their use of produced water in completions. I wanted to take a look at it and see, is it even possible for us to reuse all the water that's being produced in the basin? And the good news is, the answer is absolutely. Current disposal rate, as I mentioned, 2.7 million barrels. That's what I'm estimating we're putting away right now on disposal wells. If we're running about 155 rigs in the Midland Basin, you've got 1 frac fleet for every 2 rigs. That'd be about 75 frac fleets. If they're pumping 6 stages a day, 7,500 barrel stages, you're talking about 3.3 million barrels of water needs for current activity levels. So if you pump 80% produced water, you can use all of the produced water in the current frac activity right now. At Guidon, we're using a 60-40 mix, so 60% produced water, 40% fresh water, just based on our design. So again, It is absolutely possible to reuse all the water that's being produced in the basin right now. This is very encouraging to me, and I'm seeing a trend move this way. There's just going to require a tremendous amount of investment in infrastructure, a lot of planning, a lot more resources. So takeaways. Current shallow disposal rate, 2.7 million barrels, 7 times what we were doing in 2010. Projects to be 15 times that rate in 2025. It is undeniable San Andreas bottom hole pressure is increasing in direct correlation with oil production growth and disposal rate. It's physics. You can't add volume to a closed system and not expect the pressure to go up. We need to study the reservoir. Drilling hazards and costs are increasing rapidly. The San Andreas will cost us $29 billion across the basin, just on that liner alone. Again, the good news is we can use all the water that we're producing right now. We just have to plan it out, invest in the infrastructure, and tweak our frac designs. At the end of the day, as an industry, we need to solve this problem ourselves. If we just continue business as usual, I'm afraid that the regulators are going to step in and force us to do something that we don't want to do. We're sitting on the second biggest oil field in the world. Let's try not to screw this up, guys. Don't be this guy. Be the cowboy Spider-Man for me. You got questions?
Yeah, we have time for a couple questions. Anybody got some questions?
If you go to San Francisco and you turn on the water faucet, you're drinking recycled sewage. So why is this a problem? I don't understand why this cannot be recycled if sewage can be recycled. It could be used as drinking water, as irrigation water. It seems to me like the problem could go away.
Yeah, I think there's folks looking at that. There's just, I think, a lot of different hazardous metals in produced water versus sewage, but again, that's not my expertise. I think there are folks looking at using it for farming, but I would focus more on let's use it in our frac jobs, pump it right back where it came. Thank you.
Very much.